Hi, this is Andrew A.J. Johnson, and this is 8 Things I've Learned After 15 Years of Making Music.
It's invisible, invisible, oh yeah. It's invisible, that's my artwork.
Now, I hope you don't mind that there's a little bit of a discrepancy because I usually tend to say I started making music in 2009. I guess for the sake of this video, I'm going to say I started in 2008, which isn't completely wrong. I was composing and writing songs and involved in theater, musical shows and stuff like that long before 2009. So let's just say 2008. This video is off to a great start. Let's say 2008, which will bring us to 15 years. I hope that's okay that I kind of include a little bit of my previous background. So one of the things I've learned after 15 years is that music requires a lot of energy. Whether it's a ballad or an upbeat song, music requires energy that you need to know kind of when to turn it on and when to turn it off. The thing about entertainment, and which is a bit confusing, I guess, in this day and age, is that, you know, an audience is there to be entertained, and so they're not wanting to sit down and listen to somebody, saying that they can't play the part or they can't do this or whatever. You're there to entertain. You step up and you do the show, if that makes any sense. At the same time, we also live in a world now where we do share a lot about ourselves and share our authentic selves. And in terms of, performance energy and having a sense of showmanship and rising up to be of service to people and entertain them, yes, it requires a good amount of energy, which is why, as much as the actual performance is important, it's also, knowing when to take a break, knowing when, okay, I need to take weeks here, maybe months, to just kind of relax and recharge my batteries and get back into a sense of myself. And drinking your water and healthy diet and exercise and all of that kind of thing, it plays into your energy. What performance is about and art is about is it's actually representative of what that being is going through at that time. I'm guilty in this as much as anybody, that you kind of want to hide some of the imperfections, and you don't want people to know that maybe you haven't slept well or you're not eating right or whatever it is. Often it shows in your work anyway. It all kind of comes out anyway, what you're dealing with. So I know for myself that it has been a very tricky area, and I think as it is for all musicians, producers, artists, editors, writers, etc., it's lifelong. As somebody that's active in the creative arts, I think that's number one for me in my life. And something I've learned is really taking the word energy and what that means very seriously. It's no mistake why there are so many directors and producers or writers that talk about, energy and having, seeing a performer have good energy. It's almost half of it, pretty much. I don't know what the actual percentage. It's like you're having 10% fun and a whole bunch of work, and a lot of it's just if you're in a good spirit and you're healthy. That's all going to play into your performance and how you're doing as a creative. Well, the second thing is process. So knowing that it takes time to make music, and for any art that any artist is working on, it takes time to do that, to give it that human touch and, share those lived experiences. In some cases, it might take you 30 minutes to create that song, and it just seems to write itself really fast. Then there's other projects that you don't get done until 10 years later. It's just allowing for patience to exist alongside you while you're making art. I like the idea of organic growth in terms of, art and music or TV shows or films. I think most people would like to see that something has grown organically instead of artificially propped up, if that makes any sense. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, promotional materials, and in some cases maybe there are times you need to give a little bit of a push to a project. There is something that's so wonderful about seeing the fruits of your labor and knowing that, that took its time to grow, and you're watching it unfold, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. It kind of grows its own legs. Counter to everything that goes on in the world today, I strongly believe that music is something that you need to process and slow down with. Regardless of the style or, the tempo of the song, I know for myself, I didn't want it to feel like a rushed job. No matter what it is, you have to nurture it and take care of it. Give it some TLC. The third thing, I've coped with criticism. That's one thing that you kind of take as somebody putting yourself out there. Over the course of my musical journey here, my musical shenanigans, I've seen a lot of comments, a lot of hateful comments, just a lot of really mean-spirited, rude comments. I've heard it from people that had said they were my friend. I've heard it from family members. That it can happen from people that are really close to you, and it can also happen from, a complete stranger or acquaintance or somebody that you don't really know very well. Regardless of what happens, for me, I'm following my heart. That's a constant in my life, is following my heart, and, really having to ask myself, is what this person is saying, is it relevant, or is it important? Is it something constructive that I can sink my teeth into and go, oh, well, I'm surprised I never thought of that. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I'll see about incorporating that into my next project. Thank you so much. Is it that, or is it something that just kind of left me feeling gutted, or like that person really just doesn't understand what I'm doing? If it's somebody that's, I don't know, like working in accounting or something like this, and they're, giving me a rough time about my music, well, I have to stop a minute and say, well, why am I valuing their opinion so much? It's true that often as creatives, I'm sure anybody who's creative watching this, that sometimes you forget about your supporters. Even for me, having the kind of small following that I have, I can forget about, what about the 20 to 30 people that are at least always constantly there, no matter what I'm doing? Well, that's not a terrible thing. That I know that there's always going to be at least 20 to 30 people who are going to be really interested in something that I'm doing. It's not zero. It's not like it's 1,000. But then I have to ask myself honestly as well, say I did have thousands of people watching me, well, how engaged are those people? How much do they truly remember something about me or my art? Just because a video or something says thousands of people saw this, well, it doesn't mean they've watched the whole thing. There could be various factors into why a number is the way it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's gotten something out of that. If the person didn't really watch it from start to finish, how can that opinion really penetrate my heart? Why would I be letting something like that disturb me internally? You know, when they don't really understand it, and they're not going to give the energy, the effort into all of that. But there are people who will. There is somebody that gets that message, and people who are really listening or really feeling something that I've done, those are the experiences that mean a lot to me and mean the most to me. And usually people that are doing that aren't actively trying to criticize me, like often the people who criticize me are people that aren't really delving that deep into it, so they don't really get it, right? For lack of a better word. It's easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, people don't get my art. Well, I know that to a point, I need to make the viewers and listeners' life easier. At the same time, I also do feel as an artist, it's up to me as well to challenge the status quo, challenge cultural norms, those types of things. So, if somebody's criticizing me, then, in some ways, it does mean that I've done my job. It does, and that might be something that they'll criticize it at the time, but maybe a few months pass or a year passes, and then something might change in their mind. Maybe I had something to do with it, maybe not. I'll never know that, but I've had to figure out ways to cope with criticism. It is one of these things that it's like a full body experience. It sort of feels like when you read a really nasty comment, it's a full body experience of pain almost. And there are theories as to why that's the case for people in this day and age. I won't get into that right now, but I've had to work on that for many years to get to a better place with that, to be able to not necessarily just let it go, just move on, just think more positive, but finding ways to kind of look at that head on, showing myself compassion, sometimes just allowing myself to have those feelings and wondering, well, yeah, what is this that's stirring me so much? And it is through all of that introspection and reflection that I can then heal from that experience. I don't believe in just kind of stuffing things down, just numbing yourself to things. I'm not going to say it's an easy path, because what I do, it's not easy. It really is taking the criticisms, and in my case, I guess it's trying to not let it all get to my heart and not have that be reason for me to stop what I'm doing and, then delete everything and go and be miserable someplace and go and obsess and ruminate off somewhere. Over the years, I've learned better ways of coping with the harsh criticisms that come online. And because I've been doing this for so long, there's really nothing that surprises me anymore, if that makes any sense. Like, I've heard it all before. I've heard the same thing since I was very little. Sometimes it's the exact same thing to this very day. It's like, okay, I've heard that joke or comment or whatever, and, it kind of loses its sting, because it's like, well, that doesn't really make any sense, or it's just not accurate. Okay, number 4, I'm gonna call this selections. And what I mean by that is, over the course of time, as I've been creating, I've had to make some really tough decisions. Contrary to popular opinion, well, not really popular, because I'm not popular. I'm not as important or relevant as I like to think I am. I've had to make decisions to, get rid of a line or something that I wrote, and really, being very thoughtful about what I'm putting down on paper, what I'm singing, and then being okay to live with those choices. At the same time, I've learned that the selection process, it's a really fine balance, and it's so important to music. And I think it's such a fascinating area of music, when you think, what is it that makes a song okay to go on an album? what gives it the green light? I don't necessarily know an exact answer. Sometimes you just kind of have to follow your intuition, and you have to kind of feel your way around and know what to leave on the cutting room floor. At the same time, as I say that, I'm not necessarily the best person to speak on this. I am to a point, because I think the perception of me is that I have basically uploaded my folder that's titled All. Like, I just gave you all of my music. Everything I've ever done is out there. It's just not true. I've put a lot out on the internet, but it's not all. Then we'd be, we'd be here for like, this is probably days worth of content just to get through. For any creator, we know that you don't want that. You don't want to put out your all folder. It sort of defeats the purpose of creating something. You're taking a picture and you just put up all of the pictures. Like, obviously you have to narrow down to the one you want. For my music, I know there are selections I've had to leave off, and I've had to, go through a whole reasoning and justification for why such and such is left off and why something's on. And it's a whole thing. Throughout the years, I've been very conscious about what I'm selecting in lyrical content and, videos. And I guess in some ways, I actually have been reflecting that maybe I've played it a bit too safe in some ways. I think even though I consider myself sometimes doing quite experimental art pieces, I think there are ways that I've played it very safe. I think I'm still trying to find ways to make material that might have a little bit of an edge, but that's still tasteful. The whole thing is a fine balance. There is stuff that, might have a demo kind of feel to the song, but sometimes that's something that I like to have. Or there's stuff that it just sounds a little too overproduced or something, and so it's not working. I find that there's a whole balance with the whole thing, and especially in the digital era, making a selection for your albums or just content to put up on your YouTube channel, it can be hard to know when to rein it in and when there's times to sort of push more on a particular idea you have. Anyways, eventually selections, obviously, at the end of the day, you need to make selections, and it's a very individual process. I usually think of it in terms of a bigger picture, right? I could just zero in on one, making one song, but my mind doesn't work that way. So I've had to learn that I know that it's somewhere between the all folder and the best of my stuff, but I just wanted to find, and I'm still finding, that space between contrasts. It's between black and white. Somewhere in here, it's in an ambiguous area maybe. The places where we find beauty. Ultimately, that's the goal of art, is balancing your polar opposites there and finding, this kind of sweet spot. I cannot really understate how important it is to make good song selections and selection in design and artwork you're going to use and the way you're going to deliver your song. All these different things obviously play a part in the final result. Fundamentals. Really, that's just knowing your basics. I'm not going to sit here and go over all of the different things you'd need to know in music, basic theory, tempo, key signatures, pitch, scales, harmony, styles, all of this type of thing, right? It's so important, obviously, when you're making music, and what can make it make sense to the ear of somebody else, and know that this is identifiably a music composition I'm looking at. Well, knowing the basics about music certainly helps. There is really, I don't want to overcomplicate this because that's very easy for my brain to do. There is really a point where you think about the simplicity of the action. When it's time for me to sing, then I sing. When it's time for me to write, then I write. It's time to compose, well, be a composer, you know, the real nuts and bolts simplicity of the action. And on this point alone, honestly, which is, I think, what so many people out here on YouTube talking about music say, you know, if you can just even practice that, and I've learned over my 15 years here that, yeah, very naturally, your skill level is going to improve. So even if you're just sticking to the basics and, you know, you're consistent with that, well, yeah, it's going to get better. It's really breaking it down to like, well, what is singing? Well, that's elongated speech. Not much more than that, you know, and you're hitting these pitches that belong to your natural voice. You shouldn't really be afraid of a pitch because you've hit it so many times before. You know what I mean? I know, like, even for myself as a singer, sometimes I get into this weird headspace where it's like, well, what am I nervous about? Like, I hit the same thing. I've done this many times before. I know the one thing that's tricky though about fundamentals is when you're sitting and practicing your scales, or you're doing vocal warm-up, or, you know, those types of things, it can be a little confusing to know how to apply those lessons into your performance and as it's happening in the moment. You do need to know the fundamentals, but then when you're performing, you're not thinking about the fundamentals. You've already been through that. So in the moment when you're performing, you know, you're not thinking of, oh, now I'm going to hit an A sharp, or, you know, now I need to remember to have this placement in my mouth. It's just at that time you are doing it. You've done all of the prep work, and, you know, you want to be able to take that kind of sense of ease, you know, healthy technique into your practice. And I know about the fundamentals as well that you kind of have to keep it going every day. I've said to myself, you know, there are times I've really wanted to take a break from making music, but I can't necessarily really take that long from it before I start to get rusty. When I step away for a while from my music, you know, then I start to hear my trouble spots come back in again. It's like I've done the same thing before, but, you know, that's when during my compositions I'll have difficulty trying to come up with fills to transition from one musical idea to another, because I don't work in a linear fashion. I think about editing music in a non-linear fashion. So like I'll come up with different parts, and for me it can be difficult trying to then bring it back together. And so, you know, that's an example of me kind of forgetting the basics, you know, and sometimes just really breaking it down. It's like, well, what am I trying to do here? I want to fill here to try to introduce the next part of the song, you know, but I can really get in my mind, like, oh man, I don't know, should I put a break in here, or should I just, you know, do a hard cut? How do I get in and out of this thing? That's all part of the fundamentals and continuing to learn as well. There's not one musician, one composer, one producer or artist that knows everything about music. You know, you're continually learning, and as well you're retrieving information. I don't know if that's something that's talked about very often, but the retrieval of information, it's so important. And it's like, it's okay if you have a day where you're just not getting the basic stuff. That happens from time to time. Maybe you lost it today, maybe the next day it'll be a better day for you. You know, you just take good care of yourself, and then, you know, it all comes back to you the next day. DIY, well, I have learned to do it myself. Yeah, after 15 years, I've learned to do it yourself. And I know how that kind of sounds, because actually music is a very collaborative art form. However, I don't live in the 20th century, I live in the 21st century. So I've learned to do things on my own. Sometimes that's the only way to get stuff done. It can be very challenging to basically do everything on your own, which is my situation as a one-man band. I don't necessarily recommend it. It is something I've learned to do over the course of time. And the way to do it, I think, in music is to not be afraid to try new things. You know, don't be afraid of recording. Try singing, try dancing, try writing. Open yourself up to a variety of experiences. And I think also what DIY has taught me as well is knowing my own limitations, knowing when I've reached a point where it's like, oh, this is just too much for me to do right now, and I can only kind of maybe schedule in 2 or 3 hours to work on this song for today, and now I've put it away. Or there are times that I've outsourced work I've wanted to do on a project, and I've had producers that have mixed and mastered my songs, or I've had other artists that contributed artwork for my music. For the most part, however, I've learned to basically do it all on my own. You could argue that in some ways that's compromised my artwork. I'm not going to say you're wrong about that. I think that in some ways there is a trade-off for doing it yourself, because it's not going to be perfect. If you're wearing many different hats, there's only going to be a certain level you might be able to take your project. Again, though, that's part of being an artist in the 21st century, is that even if you are working with people, like, it's a lot less people working on something than there may have been in previous years. Actually, well, there may be a lot of writers listed on a song, but that's just so everybody gets a piece of the pie. I think it's more to the tune of that, rather than everybody said something about one song. It actually doesn't take that much people to create a song. Yes, you know, how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb? Like, I can't say that. How many people does it take to finish a song? Well, it can be just one. Actually, no, we live in an era where it doesn't take anybody at all. A computer can do it now. But I'm not going to talk about that subject in this video. I know for me, I've learned to DIY, and I'm going to continue to DIY until, I'm too old. Production skills. So, like I said in the part about selections, like just selecting your music and the different things that go into it, making clear decisions in production is very key. I've had to learn that over time, that, with all the different bells and whistles I can put on a song, the different effects and things, I've had to learn to just, okay, I know I can have 100 tracks on a song if I want. I don't need that much. I don't think there is any producer really that needs like a massive amount of tracks, and you don't need to use all of these different effects and basically just make it so your CPU is chugging along. Like, you don't need all of that, of course. So part of making clear decisions is, you lay down, say, a bass part or piano part, drums, and you really have to sit down and think, how do I want this to sound? Like, sonically, how do I want it to reach the listener? You think about compression, a limiter, your reverb, delay, EQing, maybe a chorus effect, or, whatever it is, or overdubbing, vocal overdubbing that I like to do. When you're in the middle of it, half the battle is just, I need to really focus in here on what I'm trying to do, because you can sit there forever. That's a skill I've had to learn over time, and knowing that, like, I wouldn't get anything done if I wasn't able to make decisions about how I wanted my music to be. And something that's very helpful as well as a production skill is organization. Organization plays a significant role in how your production is going. Keeping archival information, keeping notes on what I'm doing. You want to have basic documents that have all of your albums and your songs listed, the keys that they're in, the beats per minute. You want to have folders that, are marked clearly, and, here's the artwork and this is the track listing. Or you definitely want and need to have some form of organization and backup. Backing up is super important. And I would write that in as a production skill. If you're somebody that operates where you have everything's on your desktop, all these files everywhere, and it's a big mess and stuff, that might get you to where you're going. I'm not going to knock that. I've seen people that have very messy computers, but I know for myself, in order to get through a project, it really helps to have all your digital files organized. There's so much production applications and software that makes it so much easier. Like even just having a Google Documents, having lists and keeping your lyrics, your lyric folder, your backing tracks, and just everything, that the necessary elements you need for your music. Even the places you're bookmarking for research, or using a stock photo, or place to help generate graphics for you, or whatever it is, keeping all of that stuff, all the folder where you have all your plugins that maybe you want to save for a later time to download, keeping it in a place where it's clear and organized is a skill. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfect at it. Of course not. I do have some mess in places as well, but I do try to keep things relatively organized, because I know how important it is to keep productions running smoothly, or at all. I know for myself, I wouldn't have gotten half the stuff finished that I've done if I didn't know, where to grab from and what I was really looking at, So all of the titling, and when you're exporting your stems and everything labeled properly, to the best of your ability, it really helps a lot. And last but not least, keep learning. After 15 years of making music, I know what's helped keep it alive, the dream alive, my hopes, the things that drive me to want to make this art. What keeps it alive is that I have an open mind. I have an open heart. Keeping your mind open and learning is what feeds and fuels your career, basically. If you think of it as a career, I mean, sometimes I might say it's like a side hustle, or I don't know, whatever. But it's just that keeping an open mind, it allows you to break out of your regular journeys that you take online, and maybe you click on an article that you're not familiar with the subject, and through reading about it, that inspires you to write in a way that you didn't think was possible before. Or, maybe you listen to somebody online, or you listen to a vocal coach online that you normally wouldn't listen to, and they say something that just makes something click. And it was because you're open to just keep learning that it enriches your art. Those are just examples. For me, I just try to keep my mind open to listening to a variety of different styles and genres, and I like to know what's going on in the music business. In ways, I do feel like an outsider. I'm not really in it. This is something that's enjoyable for me. It's an outlet for me. I can get to be very passionate about it, but as well, I want to pay attention to what's going on the Billboard charts. I want to know kind of the things that people are talking about, and the things that get people moving. How can I be anybody that can get people to groove? Because I like to make music, that you can kind of groove to. Well, if I'm completely out of touch with what's going on culturally, and the things that I'm saying have absolutely zero to do with the time I'm living in, am I really being an effective artist? Would I have gotten anything going at all? It's really hard to measure, because, I just have always felt that way throughout the years. You know, you want to listen to stuff that's going on, and you want to be open to, you know, taking classes or workshops or reading a book based on music or performance just to freshen up on your skills. As well, as a producer, you know, I need to listen in on, you know, what are some of the plugins that people are using, or, you know, what's a better way that I could use this music software. You know, all of it's subjective at the end of the day. There are some basic stuff you kind of need to keep in mind there, but generally speaking, as a producer, you definitely want to know what's the latest update on this method of creating music. It doesn't make any sense, say, if I was still working with, I don't know, tape machines. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. Maybe there is somebody that still does. I don't know why you would, but that whole process is obviously very outdated, and now in these days we actually just apply an effect and it sounds like it's tape when it's not, which kind of, if you really think long about it, it's kind of a weird practice. You spend so long trying to perfect something, and then you try to make it sound like there's even more imperfections going on within it in a controlled way. Anyway, I'm sure that I've said enough here. It's just keeping in touch with that part of you that is curious and wondering, and your imagination is active. That's really, really going to carry you through. For anybody in any type of entertainment, media, anybody that has anything to do with communications, really, in any way, you know, you definitely do want to keep updated on how things are working, and where you feel you may belong in that picture. As much as I do music that has that nostalgia feel to it, you know, I still, in my own way, I've been pretty slow in terms of trying to update different ways that I use this technology, you know. At the end of the day, it's really the same process I've been doing for 15 years. You know, it's like, it's still MIDI keyboard, laptop, microphone, headphones, Word spreadsheet, and you know, I have my very basic kind of minimal studio setup at home. I find that pretty much, you know, everything I mentioned here are lessons that have come up again and again over time, and I'm sure that I could make this video next year when I could say, you know, you could say it's more accurate that it's been 15 years, but whatever. I could make this video in 2033, and I might say virtually the exact same thing. You know, these are the lessons that I keep learning through music, and just wanting to continue to just be a decent person, pleasant person, a graceful person, somebody that's honest and open, not afraid to express myself, and all these different types of things, you know, being thoughtful and understanding. All of those values as well play a part in making music. If I had absolutely nothing going for me, I don't think I would have made it this far. And thank goodness for that. I'm very grateful that even there are people that have listened to anything I've written or sung. You know, it's a really wonderful feeling. And I just hope that me imparting this information has been able to either help somebody else who's maybe perhaps feeling like they want to quit in this current social media ecosystem. You know, it's a pretty harsh landscape and very difficult for artists. I know for myself, I don't have any plans of stopping the vision I have for myself as a creative. I just want to keep it going. I think that as the years have gone by, I actually tried to do more live stuff, but currently I think I've been a lot more focused on just the recording, and knowing that, you know, any success I've had basically stems from recording. And, you know, it's like, well, that's what you should be doing instead of trying to go out there and doing all this live show stuff, which there's a place for that. I'm okay to just, you know, write and sing at home and upload stuff, and that's kind of like the performance for me. Anyways, if you've liked this talk and this has made sense to you and it's not a complete rambling tangent, I hope that you would kindly like and subscribe to my channel. Click the bell for new updates, and also follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud, TikTok, and right here on YouTube. So with all of that to say, thank you so much for watching this and listening to me this going on and on and on. I wish you very well, especially if you're a creator or you're an artist. I wish you very well on your process. I really do hope you got something out of this, and yeah, just take care and be well. Until next time, bye for now.
I'm an improbable soul, and let me tell you right, and you don't know, oh no, what I've been through. Yes, and I know.